new commissioner, Brian.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
All right, I'll shake everyone's hands, but I know you all want to get started and go through the process, so.
We'll have a seat and have you take a minute and tell us what you've been up to since we last saw you, and remind us why you want to be a circuit court judge.
Absolutely. First of all, I appreciate you all going through this process. I know it's a long process for you all, and I do appreciate that. Since my last interview last year, my reasons for wanting to judge are essentially the same. I don't have a family history. I'm the first lawyer in my family, so I don't have the childhood stories. But when I went to law school, I had the privilege of interning with Judge Corrigan in the Middle District, and through that process, I got to see how he operated as a judge, and I really appreciated the process. He was analytical, thorough, and patient, and seeing behind the scenes really gave me the urge to become a judge later in life. And as I've come to later in life, I've wanted to do that. Through my experiences as well, I've been a litigator for 17 years, and I've seen great judges. I've seen some practices that I wouldn't necessarily agree with. One of those being when you prepare for a dispositive motion and you put the time in for hearings and you walk into the hearing room, and then in the corner you see your brief book under a pile of documents. You know it hasn't been read. Sometimes it's frustrating. Some people gripe about that. My philosophy is, I don't want to be the person who gripes. I want to be the person who takes on the challenge and changes the system through his actions. Also, as an arbitrator for the last 3 years, I've had the privilege of being in a quasi-judicial role, which I think has helped me see the process from the beginning to the end. Since the last time we spoke, the other thing I think more important for you all to hear from me is I got very good critiques through my last process and areas that I needed to improve on, and I left last time, and I've made it a point to do those things, be more involved in the 7th Circuit Bar Associations, which I've done, be more involved with pro bono work, which I've done, be more involved in charitable work in the 7th Circuit, which I've done as well. I think my biggest attributes that I would bring to being a judge are I'm driven. I think through my application it shows that I'm self-motivated. My temperament, I think I'm very even-keeled, and then again, my experience as an arbitrator.
Let me ask you a question. In order to get AAA certified, what do you have to do, and what does that entail?
It's about an 8-month process that involves going through an interview process, which culminates with typically an in-person interview in Atlanta, which I did. You meet with the director of the Southeast region, who I met with. She sat down with me, interviewed, went through my prior experiences, and it's basically somewhat not to this level, but it's somewhat of this level where they go through and they want to see your demeanor, and there's a lot riding on it. Just as when you all put the 6 names forward, that's whoever you put forward as a representative of your commission, a representative of the 7th Circuit, and obviously Governor Scott. So they want to make sure whoever they put forward is going to be an appropriate person.
Another question for you. The non-jury trials.
So,
You've got 28 of them listed. Describe those for me. Are those hour-long hearings, or I know in your field you can end up in 3-week-long non-jury trials. So where are you falling on that scale? Kind of give me that next level of information.
yes, sir. I would say there were a few of them that were probably 3-4 hour hearings, but the majority of those non-jury cases were construction related, so there were multiple day hearings. They weren't just simply trials. They weren't simply a 2-hour hearing. It was a full-blown trial, and it gets into the experience. While I know I don't have the list of jury trials that others may have, to me, 90% or 80% of the work before a jury trial or a non-jury trial is the work you do to prepare for it. It's got all the same requirements. We go through witness lists, exhibit lists, depositions, everything. And to culminate, I've got that civil experience. I don't have the 200 jury trials or non-jury trials, but I've got the civil experience. I've done it. I've handled complex cases. The cases I've taken to verdict or judgment, they have had that experience with them.
Try and get you back to your community involvement. That was the topic of our conversation last time. Just highlight for us what you have done since we were last together.
Absolutely. The first thing I did is I reached out to Dennis Bayer, and after Hurricane Irma in Flagler, there was a city hall meeting I drove down to. Through my experience in construction and as a construction litigator, they had a series of attorneys in a forum where we would sit down and help people with assignment of benefits. So I did that. I came down, met with people about that process to help them through Hurricane Irma. I'm involved with Blessings in a Backpack still, which is a nonprofit that provides food for kids on the weekends. I'm also involved with Kids Bridge. I've reached out. I was there last week, went through another tour, donated, and committed to being involved with Kids Bridge. I'm involved with Christmas Come True in Flagler. It was a cause I saw, and it was something more important for me that I could take my kids to see so that they could see the process of donating. Next week, I've volunteered to go to Flagler, the Justice Hammond Center, to provide my time free of charge to individuals who have questions about civil matters. I've looked into Putnam as well. I'm committed to the process. My understanding is, I may not be as connected as some folks, but my understanding is this seat may end up in Putnam. I've been proactive. I've looked at charities there. There's a charity there that need to feed children of Putnam, which is essentially the same thing as Blessings in a Backpack. So I've looked into those programs to make sure that if I do go to the next level, I'm prepared and I'm ready to get involved.
Have you put in for any seats in the Fourth Circuit?
No, I have not, and I won't.
Is there a reason why?
I'm in a unique situation. I live in northern St. Johns County. I'm not moving, and I wouldn't move for a judge position. There was one that came up with Judge Foster. I didn't go for that. I'm committed to the Seventh Circuit. Unfortunately for me, geographically, I live on the northern part of the Seventh Circuit, but I'm still committed to the Seventh Circuit. I live in the circuit. A lot of my work is actually in the Seventh Circuit. I know my law firm physically is in Jacksonville, but I do mediations, arbitrations. Had an arbitration 2 days ago in St. Augustine. I do a lot of work through this region, and I'm committed to the region.
If this probably, if it might be in Daytona, would you just let it move? I don't know exactly where you live, but that's got to be, that's a long drive.
Honestly, the drive down to Daytona it's a little over an hour for me, but to drive to Jacksonville from where I live is pretty near an hour through traffic, so it's about the same. And it's the same, honestly, my response would be the same as the last time I went through the interview process. I'm committed to it, and I wouldn't do it if I couldn't. I wouldn't put my name up and go through the process if I was going to turn back and say it's too far. There's nothing too far in the Seventh for me. Wherever I'm put, I'll be honored and I'll be there.
So let's talk about that. The way the chief has assigned seats, the opening of the vacancy right now is here in Daytona Beach Circuit Civil, and we are backed up. I mean, I have cases with just tons of motions waiting for the judge to be assigned, so I can get a consistent judge with consistent rulings. What do you do if you're assigned to a docket like that that has been, backed up for months without a judge? And how do you sort of triage the cases that are? I mean, it looks busy, but it is. When attorneys start trying to get hearing time, it's going to be crazy.
It's just through case management, and I think that's, as I mentioned before, the 80% before we get to the trial. I have extensive experience in that. I've seen the good practices, the bad practices of how to manage cases. It's through case management hearings. It's through pushing the file along, pushing it to triage and make sure you're pushing things as fairly as you can, but efficiently as possible as well to make sure they're going forward. And being active, it's not, to me, I'm not going to treat it as a clock in, clock out. I know that there's a lot of work to be done, and if there's a lot of backup that has to come forward, I'm committed to doing that, whatever it takes, to make sure that the process moves.
And do you have some specific things that you've seen judges do that has been effective?
Quite the biggest thing I've seen is just moving cases through case management hearings, going through and taking chunks of the cases, saying, okay, this case is here, let's get a hearing, let's get a status conference, let's do that. And then once you start getting status conferences with the parties, they move them a lot quicker, and it gives the judge an understanding of what's going on, where the case is at, and what needs to be done.
My understanding of your practice is that it's at a very high level and you're representing mostly builders. Is that fair?
I've had a fair amount of associations as well. The condo work has all been, a lot of condo work's been for associations, unit owners. I've done a fair share for individuals, but most of it now is on the defense side, yes.
How would you deal with pro se litigants and, not everyone is going to be represented with two skilled counsel if they come before our judges here.
I do that now in arbitrations. I've had several arbitrations this year that have had pro se. The arbitration final hearing I had 2 days ago had a pro se party.
Did you find for them?
What's that?
Did you find for
I haven't ruled yet, but I have ruled for pro se parties, yes. Yeah, and the way I treat it is, I apply the law to the facts, no matter what. I'm not going to go into the preconceived disposition of it's industry versus individuals. I've represented both. I think I'm fairly balanced, and I will go through and follow the facts and the law.
I'm kind of interested in that. Tell me about the dynamic between you and the pro se litigant. How did you treat them? Did you coach them? Did you give them suggestions? How did that work?
Not at all. What I do in the arbitration process when I walk in, I make it clear. First of all, I try to make it a very cordial environment because I understand they're nervous of the process, just like someone sitting here is nervous right now. But I explain to them outright that my role as an arbitrator is as the decision maker. I can't give advice. I can't tell them what to do, and I've never had an issue with that. As long as I lay the groundwork from the outset, I've never had a problem where someone comes in and says, what would you do, what do you think, give me advice. They understand my role. I make it very clear, and I would never cross that line, and I wouldn't want anyone to inadvertently put me in that position where they ask me to cross the line. So I just politely set the rules from the beginning, and I've never had an issue with it in arbitration.
I have a question. You don't have any criminal experience. Would you be comfortable handling death penalty cases?
I would.
When you act as an arbitrator, I guess generally you hear the evidence, hear everybody, hear the witnesses, and then you go back and you draft a report, draft a ruling. Is that kind of the way that works?
Yes, sir. I mean, it's a quasi-judicial process, and everything from the pre-hearing to drafting the award. I've dealt with pre-hearing motions. I had a motion to quash come in yesterday on an out-of-state subpoena I have to rule upon. I deal with objections. I deal with controlling the entire process, and it's my responsibility at the end to draft a binding award. And sometimes I've been asked to do awards that are findings of fact and law, so detailed awards.
And after you hear the evidence and see the documents, is there a time limit? Is there an average of time by which you have that report or your decision done?
Yes, sir. The AAA typically puts 30 days. Mine are done. I've never had one done later than 5 days, and those are on complex ones. And the reason for that is just my own personal experience. It gets back to controlling and managing, and also the expectations. When parties are in a proceeding, they want a timely ruling. No one wants to sit there and wait 30 days for a ruling. It's a very uncomfortable feeling. I do my best to try to get out as quickly as I can, as long as I have all of the information. If I'm waiting for affidavits, for fees or costs or anything like that, obviously I have to wait, but to the extent I have that, I try to make it as quick as possible and put myself in the position of someone who's waiting for an award.
How about, like you mentioned, motion to quash? That's something that just gets, everything is in writing, submitted to you. You're not holding a hearing on those kinds of motions, are you?
I can, if the parties agree, I can hold a hearing, and this one I've actually set a hearing in 2 weeks. That's because of the parties, because of Labor Day. It wasn't me pushing it out. I actually wanted it Tuesday. But I've had parties come in where they provide the documents, the motion, the responses. I've had other ones where it's on the fly. You'll be at a pre-hearing and all of a sudden someone raises a motion and sometimes parties say, we're fine, let's go ahead and hear it. Sometimes they say we're not ready, and obviously I'm not going to put anyone in a position of saying, you have to respond right now even though you're not prepared, but sometimes they're prepared and they're ready to go. So it's basically however it comes, I take it.
Anybody else? Brian, thank you for coming this afternoon.
I appreciate it. Thank you all for your time.
And
Thank you.
as you know, we'll let you know this afternoon.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you all.